I want you to picture this. It's Thanksgiving. The table is set, the candles are lit, everyone's smiling like we're some kind of perfect family. And then my brother stands up, wineglass in hand, and casually announces that my parents had secretly signed over the company I spent 6 years bleeding for. To him, not a word to me. Not a conversation. Not even a text. Just gone. And I remember the silence that fell over that table. Everyone looking at me, waiting to see if I'd cry, if I'd beg, if I'd fall apart right there next to the mashed potatoes. I didn't. I picked up my glass, looked my father dead in the eyes, and smiled. Because what none of them knew, not my brother, not my mother, not a single person at that table, was that 3 weeks earlier, I had already made my move. And by the time dessert was served, their world was already over. Stay right there, because what I did next is something their lawyer is still trying to explain. Hit that subscribe button and don't you dare scroll away, because this story, it only gets colder from here. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I built something real. I was 23 when I started the company. Not with my parents' money, I want to make that clear from the beginning. I started it with $800 from a waitressing job, a beat-up laptop, and a storage unit I was renting for $60 a month because I couldn't afford actual office space. It was a product sourcing and resale business. I found underpriced goods, surplus inventory, discontinued lines, wholesale overstock, and I flipped them online. Slowly at first, then faster. Then it started to breathe on its own. By year 2, I was clearing $4,000 a month in profit. By year 4, I had 2 part-time employees, a real office, and contracts with 3 regional retailers. My parents knew about it. They watched it grow. My mother used to brag about it at church. My daughter built her own business, like she had something to do with it. She didn't. But here's where the story gets dark. When the business hit its 5th year, when the numbers were genuinely impressive, my father started showing up. Not to help, not to invest, just to observe, ask questions, poke around. I thought he was proud. I genuinely believed that. I was an idiot. What I didn't know was that my brother Marcus, 31 years old, never held a job longer than 8 months, currently living in my parents' basement, had been having private conversations with my father for almost a year. About my company. About how the family should benefit. About how maybe legally, since my father had once let me use his personal credit card to cover a $1,200 supply order in year 1, maybe he had some kind of claim. They actually convinced themselves of that. Or maybe they just needed a story thin enough to sleep at night. Either way, they moved quietly. They found a lawyer. A cheap one, clearly, and they drafted paperwork, an ownership transfer built on that single $1,200 transaction, claiming it was a capital investment. I found out none of this until Thanksgiving. Until Marcus stood up at that table with the smuggest smile I have ever seen on a human face and announced it like he was accepting an award. Mom and Dad wanted me to share some exciting news. As of last month, I'm the official owner of the company. Full legal transfer. Signed and done. He looked at me when he said it, like he wanted to watch me shatter. Here's what Marcus didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. 6 months before that Thanksgiving dinner, I had gotten a call from a business attorney. Not for anything dramatic, just a routine contract review for one of my retail deals. But during that meeting, she asked me something that changed everything. Is your business formally protected? Trademarks, IP, operating agreements? I told her it was registered as an LLC under my name. She paused. Then she said, "That's good. But if you ever plan to scale, you need iron walls around your core assets. Intellectual property, brand identity, proprietary systems, all of it needs to be separated and protected." I didn't think much of it at the time. But I followed her advice. Over the next 8 weeks, I quietly restructured everything. I trademarked the brand name. I filed separate IP ownership over the supplier network I had personally built. Every contact, every contract, every negotiated rate. I documented every process, every system, every workflow as proprietary methodology under my name specifically. And then, the move that ended them, I transferred the most valuable assets into a second LLC that my parents had absolutely zero knowledge of, zero connection to, zero claim over. The original LLC, the one my father's lawyer had so cleverly seized using that $1,200 story, I had already quietly hollowed it out. They stole the shell. So when Marcus stood up at that Thanksgiving table announcing his grand inheritance, he had no idea he was celebrating owning a company with no suppliers, no brand, no systems, and no contracts. Just a registered name and an empty bank account. I let him finish his little speech. I even clapped softly. My mother was beaming. My father was nodding like a king who had just divided his kingdom wisely. I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead, I walked to my car, pulled out an envelope I had prepared 3 weeks earlier, and walked back inside. I set it on the table in front of Marcus. Quietly, calmly. Since we're making announcements, I said, I thought you should have that. Inside was a legal summary, the trademark filings, the IP transfers, the new LLC documentation, a letter from my attorney explaining, in plain simple English, that the company they had just stolen had no functioning assets, no supplier agreements, and no transferable value. And at the bottom, a single line I had asked my attorney to include personally. Any attempt to operate under the existing brand name will constitute trademark infringement and will be prosecuted immediately. My brother's face went the color of ash. My father grabbed the papers. Read them. Read them again. My mother said, and I will never forget this. This isn't right. This isn't fair. I picked up my bag, put on my coat, and I looked at her for what I already knew would be one of the last times. Neither was Thanksgiving, I said, and I walked out. That was 14 months ago. Marcus never opened the business. He didn't have the suppliers, didn't have the brand, didn't have a single relationship I had spent 6 years building. My new company, the real one, crossed 7 figures 8 months later. My parents have called twice. I didn't answer. Some people say I should have given them a chance to apologize. That family is family. That I should heal. Maybe. But I remember that table. I remember Marcus's smile. I remember my father nodding. And I remember that none of them, not once, called me to apologize before they signed those papers. So no, there's no healing here. There's just me, my business, and the very quiet, very permanent sound of a door closing. They thought they took everything from me. They didn't know I'd already taken it back.